Senator Bernie Sanders is telling progressives in the House to hold the line and oppose a bipartisan infrastructure bill unless the legislation is also paired with a reconciliation package. A clever Twitter user connected the dots to an iconic film speech.
3 weeks from now, imagine where you will be, and it will be so. Hold the line. Stay with me.
So that's live footage of the Congressional Progressive Caucus meeting yesterday. But Emily, so Ilhan Omar is the whip for the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and so she addressed a private meeting of progressives yesterday after Nancy Pelosi said we're going to have a vote on Thursday on the infrastructure bill. Omar told the caucus, according to people who were on the call, she said, "I just got off the phone with Bernie Sanders. He says, look, if you let this bill go through, you're going to get screwed by the Senate. Mm-hmm. Do not trust 50 Democratic senators," and he's thinking about 2 in particular, Sinema and Manchin. "Do not trust them to deliver on the Build Back Better bill, the reconciliation bill, if you pass this on Thursday." And more than 24 progressives on the call committed to voting no on Thursday. Pelosi was then later asked about Sanders' support of voting no, and she said, "Look, everybody's got to do what they've got to do," which is a signal to them that she's not whipping this, and she's not behind the scenes. She's not whipping this. So what do you make of this rising kind of ability of the left in the House to actually kind of stand up to its leadership?
And we'll see if it does, if they're able to withstand the pressure here, which if I were, a strategist on the left, I would absolutely tell them they have the political capital to do. It's just holding the line, as Senator Russell Crowe said. And by the way, Ryan demanded we use that video.
Yes, that's right.
he demanded, and we're glad because it's hilarious. But as Senator Russell Crowe was saying, hold the line, they actually really do have the political capital to do that. Mm-hmm. I think what you just said about Nancy Pelosi is a testament to it. It's not just Sinema and Manchin on the Senate side. There is sort of the cover in the way that Senator McCain was the cover in the healthcare negotiations for other people who would have voted that down had he not done it. That's what's happening. And so this is fascinating. It comes to, we've talked about this before, it brings to mind the way the Freedom Caucus handled the Republican establishment and Republican leadership. And I think just as Democrats, this is a huge test for them. And it's also a huge test for Nancy Pelosi's entire career as to how she's handling this moment.
And the rub here is that a lot of progressives have said that they're a no on Thursday, but then they say unless there's a framework and an agreement for how to move forward on the reconciliation bill. And there is a lot of room to move a huge exception through that. So in other words, Pelosi is working very hard with the Senate today and tomorrow to come up with a framework, which would basically what they seem to be saying there is that if you got Bernie Sanders, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, AOC, Pelosi, and Schumer to all come to the microphones and say, we have a deal.
Yep.
And here's the framework of the deal. It's going to be $2.5 trillion. It's going to, the child tax credit is going to be this. It's going to raise $2.9 trillion through these particular revenue raisers. And it's going to go to the budget committee next week. It's going to go from the budget committee to the floor. And then we're going to pass it through. That's the kind of assurance they're talking about. The idea that they could get there by tomorrow seems impossible. But still, if they do, you're still then putting a lot of faith in them to actually deliver.
Yeah, because the pressure is off once that first bill is passed. And that's why, as you have covered very closely over the course of the entire summer and now into the fall, that's why Justice Democrats have always insisted these two bills be tied together, because as soon as you pass that first one, the Manchins and the Sinemas, they have absolutely no incentive to pass a really big package packed with progressive priorities. They don't. They lose it. And so you are putting an enormous amount of trust in the Democratic establishment and in Democratic congressional leadership, and it does not trust that they deserve whatsoever, no matter what they say now. Nancy Pelosi coming out and saying, listen, we thought we had a deal until we heard the 3.5 trillion number needed to come down, is what was always going to happen. That's how these negotiations were always going to get screwed. And the question now is whether, the establishment can get the trust. Right,
exactly. And what you have is their word. And they already broke their word once because everybody had agreed on the two-track strategy. But tied into this is the fight over the government shutdown that's about to be ended this week. That seems to be off the table, but you still have the threat of a default. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned lawmakers on Tuesday that they have until October 18th until the country defaults on the national debt if Congress does not vote to raise or suspend the debt ceiling.
This would be a manufactured crisis we had imposed on this country, which has been going through a very difficult period, is on the road to recovery, and it would be a self-inflicted wound of enormous proportions.
So that warning has at least gotten Wall Street spooked. JP Morgan's chief executive, Jamie Dimon, told Reuters that the country's largest lender was preparing for the, quote, potentially catastrophic event by scenario planning how a potential U.S. credit default would affect markets, client contracts, its capital ratios, and how rating agencies would react. We have new Hill-HarrisX data on that matter, so let's take a look. Now, the poll found 46% of voters said they favor the U.S. government raising the debt ceiling, while 54% oppose. When the pollsters asked the question along with more of an explanation of the situation with the debt ceiling, the poll found the results to be actually a 50-50 split. A new Morning Consult poll found that if the U.S. were to default, 4 in 10 voters would blame everyone, 3 in 10 would blame Democrats, and 2 in 10 would blame Republicans. Some economists and Democratic lawmakers are calling on President Biden to bystep the debt ceiling drama by minting the coin, a loophole that allows the Treasury Department to mint a $1 trillion platinum coin deposited at the Federal Reserve and then continue paying its bills as normal. As normal, I guess maybe that raises the question of whether our normal is really moral. Are you surprised by those numbers? They're actually sort of closer than I thought they would be.
Come on, people, ridiculous.
Yeah.
So what if maybe if you told people, do you support or oppose your 401k being wiped out tomorrow? Maybe that one, for people who have a 401k, but that's, there's a significant portion of people do have 401ks. Do you support or oppose ATMs working when you go to them? Then you would start to see more lopsided numbers. I think people don't have any understanding of what a U.S. default on its debt would
It's hard to understand.
It is hard.
It really is.
You'd have to ask, did you like or not like the 2008 financial crisis? You could ask it that way. Mm-hmm. Do you want to do another one for no reason? But it does explain why Mitch McConnell is so insistent that he's going to make Democrats do this completely on their own, because the numbers are on their side.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's great for Republicans either, because Democrats, and this is always the case, especially with government shutdowns that Republicans insist on, Democrats have the benefit of the entire media doing their bidding in terms of messaging, and I think that's why it's a hugely contributes to the broader narrative. Republicans being sort of careless and callous.
That's an interesting point, because the brand broadly for normies of Democrats is that they're pro-government, and they're pro-taxes or pro-spending and all that stuff, whereas Republicans are anti-government, anti-spending. And so if there's a shutdown or if there's some type of debt issue, then you would gravitate towards Republicans being the ones who are like on the side of that issue, though the poll had, because they're in the minority, only 2 in 10 plus, I guess 60% said it's either both parties' fault or both parties and Republicans.
You can frame shutdowns and debt negotiations in a way that's positive for either party. You can always do that. That's why the 4 in 10 number of people who would blame everyone, I'm glad to see that that's the highest one, because that is the correct one. They're both at blame for breaking our government and then for getting into these negotiations where they are both wrong. Sometimes one side deserves more blame than the other, but the media always takes the side of Democrats. And so Republicans generally then lose out in the messaging war, because there's always an ability for Democrats to spin it as the fault of Republicans. I actually think they have a fairly easy case, not a correct case in this instance. And if the media takes that up, Republicans get the blame. So I understand the McConnell philosophy here. I just don't have the same confidence that it'll work out. Right.
And if the wealthy donors to both parties lose 20 to 30% off of their net worth, they're not going to be very happy.
No, they won't.
I don't think they like that. Thanks for watching What America's Thinking. We will see you next time.